Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Rising Laterally podcast. This is Arjun Sachdev.
And this is Jay Ballou. We hope you find something here that offers you new meaning or a fresh perspective.
If you do, we encourage you to give it life.
Be bold.
Experiment.
And most importantly, bring it into the interactions with the people you surround yourself with.
And see what happens. Our guest today is Grace Gong. She's the author of 2 books, host of the Smart Venture podcast, and former investment manager who has experience in consumer tech, venture capital, and real estate private equity in Beijing and Shanghai. Her first book, called The Last Key to Success, featured 21 founders on Forbes 30 Under 30 list back in 2016. And her second book in 2017, the one that Jay and I are actually familiar with because we actually read it, How to Be a VC, featured her interviews with 22 investors on Forbes Midas list, which is the list of the best deal makers in venture capital. So think about people who invested in Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and those types of companies. That book actually shot up to the #1 spot in terms of the new release in the venture capital category on Amazon list. And her podcast is currently one of the fastest growing in the tech and business space because it offers us a peek inside the world of startups, founders, tech executives, and some of the top investors through her lineup of amazing guests. And so as we have this conversation, I encourage people that are tuning in to consider how this is actually a part of your life. You may not realize it, but when you're using Facebook, Google, Twitter, Slack, when you're ordering glasses off of Warby Parker, when you're working at a WeWorks, spot, if you made a reservation on Airbnb, if you ordered through DoorDash, if you use Coinbase for your Bitcoin, if you've been trading on Robinhood today, if you're going to ride the Peloton bike, all of those were backed or are still backed by VC money. So Grace, besides the fact that you're simply just, another human being and living with us, with all that, we truly believe that you're a fascinating person and you're going to be our first connection as a community into the venture capital, startup, and investor world, which has experienced double-digit growth over the last 6 years, but now there's some interesting adjustments that are taking place through this pandemic. So you have your own experience, but you've had the unique chance to engage with really successful people. You're going to be able to share a lot of what you've learned from your conversations with those folks. And I'd imagine that tapping into that mindset is going to be something that we're going to do throughout this conversation as a key takeaway for the people that are tuning in. And on top of that, you are just an inspiration in terms of following dreams and making them realities. So you show that entrepreneurial spirit that we encourage a lot of our community to explore. So thank you for your presence and welcome to the show.
Wow, thank you so much, Arjun and Jay. I don't know. I have to clap because of your, the introduction. It was so nice. Thank you so much.
There you go. No, absolutely. We're happy to have you here and share the space. So tell us a little bit about what your 2020 was like and what you're excited about in 2021, especially about the VC world.
About 2020, I was really lucky that I started Smart Venture podcast in the middle of pandemic. So I have more than 1 listeners. That's what my major concern was my first listener going to be just my mom or something? So it was such an interesting experience. I've been thinking about creating a podcast since 2018, but I actually started doing it in 2020, and that's a start. And I'm really glad you guys started the Rising Laterally podcast too, which I think it's just a really cool experience in 2021. I hope to grow the podcast and to help more listeners that are interested in getting into tech or venture capital.
Nice. Absolutely. You're going to be a node for us. You're going to get us into that world. So something that Jay and I actually talk a lot about, encourage folks to think about is to start exploring intersections of things, because that's when you start to feel ignorant because you don't know a lot. And then you also start to find opportunities. And so you can find the fascinating and endless possibilities when you link different industries, technologies, philosophies, psychologies. And in a way, that's what a good VC does. That's what a good investor does. That's what a good entrepreneur is able to do. They're interested, they're naturally curious, they're able to find these underserved gaps or overlooked areas where disruption can be caused, or if more efficiency can be introduced into the world. and then they seek those out. They take calculated risks, they invest in it, and they continue to explore it, and hopefully it pays off. So I know that there's a lot more to their mindset and their skill set, but if we get right into it, when you reflect on your conversations with some of the best in Silicon Valley over the past few years, keep in mind this is a world where 2/3 of VC backed startups fail, and there's less than a 1.5% chance of $1 billion company being created. When you reflect on that, can you tell us what stands out to you as some of the most important hard and soft skills that you think make some of the best CEOs, entrepreneurs, or VCs?
Absolutely. I think one of the key skills I would say would be communication skills. Um, After I was really lucky to be interviewing some of the greatest venture capitalists in the world, after chatting with a lot of them and a lot of funders, I found that one of the core ability is they are able to communicate their vision and their mission to their employees or their investors or people that they are trying to acquire as a customer or just people on their team. So I feel like communication skill is definitely one of the biggest part on the journey.
No,
Mm.
absolutely. That's something we've also talked about in the past in terms of being able to communicate your idea and having a duality mindset may be something that's important moving forward too, where if you're an investor, you should be able to talk to other parts of your team, maybe the programmers or the marketing folks, and vice versa. If you're coding, you should still have some of the skills to go be able to pitch your idea to an investor. So that duality mindset and communication and sharing the vision, I think, is something that's super important. So thank you for sharing that.
No, thank you for asking.
Yeah. So I mean, but if we rewind, tell us about how you got to this point and what your path has been like. Tell us about the environment that maybe led you to you writing your first book, then your second book, and how all of that's come together for you.
Yeah, totally. In 2016, I saw a lot of my friends who were creating companies. I just have a fascination about creating one myself. So actually, backstory a little bit. When I was in high school, I created a student organization in my high school, and we started writing these English newspapers in my high school in China because I saw that all of us were gonna study abroad and we don't really have much that we could sell as our story to go give it to the admission. So I thought maybe it's good that if we just jot it down our journey on creating these student organizations. So I started an English newspaper in my high school. So it's not like an actual
Nice.
newspaper. I feel like it's a more like a campus newspaper
Mm-hmm.
for those who are listening. Um, so I just had like just try to convince all my roommates and friends. I went to an international boarding school in China. So just like all my roommates and friends and everybody to just contribute to this newsletter or newspaper. And I will have our English teacher to check our grammar just because
Oh yeah.
we don't really know what we're doing. And every Friday when the basically everyone's parents are going to pick us up from the school, we'll sell it around the pickup area. So people's
Nice.
parents were crazy about these newspapers just because
Hmm.
their kids contribute in these newspapers. So that's how I started my first, I guess, the entrepreneurial venture.
Yeah.
After that, when I came to Silicon Valley, I realized like almost everyone I met were doing something entrepreneurial. Either they're starting a company or they're starting a project with their friends. I encountered many entrepreneurs. So at the beginning of 2016, I just saw a lot of my friends were on the Forbes 30 under 30. So I just started asking them, like, hey, how do you like be on there? And then like how do you and then they're like, we created a company. So I see the pattern was like everybody created a company. So I was like, how do you create a company? And then they're like, oh, this is how you get funding, this is how you get people to do marketing, this is how you get a co-founder. So I was trying to write, I guess, like a journal for myself about how people do these things. So in the end, I just like started like meeting more people, more entrepreneurs. So I like I realized I went to a lot of these conferences, everyone was asking the same questions. So
Oh
I
yeah.
decided to just basically interview a bunch of people who have done so to put together this book. So that's like how I started this journey about like entrepreneurship. So um and then one thing led to another. After this book, I was really interested in learning more about how VC work. Same thing happened to VC, and then I actually was really lucky to work in Shanghai with a Chinese venture capital firm as associate slash investment manager. So that was the general picture of the journey.
No, it's
And
beautiful.
when you reflect back on your time meeting your friends that were founding their own companies, would you say that there was a sort of thread of creativity through all of them? Were they very creative minded people? Because I would imagine it takes a lot of creativity to pull a company kind of out of thin air.
Yeah, for sure. I think everyone I've met have definitely have the creativity, but I think more of it is probably curiosity and execution. I think the common thread I've seen from everybody I've interviewed is everyone's really action driven. Instead of pause at the thinking stage, they just throw something onto the wall and see if it stick. I feel like everybody were very hands-on. So that's my general thought about them. I feel like that's something that I've learned from chatting with them, and I definitely
Mm.
see everyone were just really hardworking and execution driven.
Nice. Yeah. And so, I mean, you're obviously a lot of these folks have created something and they have an outcome. But when you think about the investing world, venture capital world, the word risk comes up a lot. What does taking risk mean to you?
I think one thing is, like you just said, taking calculated risks. That's really important. I think doing your research is extremely important before just jump right in, because I think a lot of the mistakes or a lot of the hardships could be avoided by spending a lot of time planning it out and thinking about how to go about it. So I definitely, that's my take on it. So, but I've seen many of the greatest investors or founders, I think they just see it as opportunity. They value the upside more than the downside. So they just look at it as an opportunity to jump in.
Yeah, it's a pretty unique challenge because like part of a VC's objective is to kind of hit a home run. I mean, it's really a game of home runs. You kind of hear a lot of investors like Peter Thiel has said that a lot. He's an early Facebook investor. He's PayPal's co-founder, and he's talked about it's a game of home runs, and he looks for companies that create new technology instead of companies that are replicating something that already exists. He thinks that, if you can have vertical progress, something from 0 to 1, that's the type of company you want to look for. But again, that's like looking for a Facebook type of company. He actually tries to caution against that horizontal progress where you take something that's already existing and spread it somewhere else. Maybe you're recreating a service in a new city. So he's got that mindset, but I feel like a lot of VCs, it's easy to fall into the trend of what is hot right now because of that reputational risk that your bet kind of needs to work out.
I feel like if you're investors, you definitely have to think about the upside and be optimistic about it. Just because I think a lot of the greatest company wouldn't exist if nobody take a risk. If nobody back, I guess Facebook, no one. I don't know if the Facebook team will keep pursuing it. So I think I definitely feel like the value of risk taking and the value of people focusing on what could go right is extremely important. I constantly seen on my LinkedIn feed someone posting about, if you don't send that email, if you don't uh just pursue an opportunity, nothing will happen. And what can go wrong about it? Just someone don't reply or someone don't say yes to something. You don't really need to focus on the no's. You just need to focus on getting one yes. So I feel like that mentality is extremely important no matter what you do.
hmm And I imagine many unicorns come from founders that have founded previous companies that failed. So I imagine a lot of the biggest names in the VC world, faced failure early on in their careers and were able to rebound.
I think that is, from my personal understanding, I think that is true, because I think society will only promote the biggest success of yours. And if you have failed multiple times in the past, I feel like as long as you learn from it, it's gonna just be okay. Just because nobody is gonna remember the 10 times something failed. They're only gonna remember the time that you become, I don't know, Robin Hood. So
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't think the Robin Hood founder failed like 10 times or anything, but I'm just saying like because of that's a success. So people will only remember the success.
Yeah.
Yeah. But psychologically, as we all know, it's really hard to keep going through those no's and keep powering through. But I think a lot of the folks that are listening already kind of feel like, you can kind of battle through that. But so I mean, what would you say like your suggestion would be to people might be younger right now?
Mhm.
What would you tell them about this space? Like, is it something to get into? Because if you look at March 2020 to year over year. So like March 2019 to March 2020, there was actually a 20% decline in venture capital and deal making and all this stuff, mergers and acquisitions and things like that. So what would you say to someone who may be thinking about getting in right now?
I think pursuing something you're passionate about is never really, I would never say no to that. I think just depends on uh I would be really set on my goal, but I would be flexible about how I get there because there is so many different paths you could take to get into venture capital. It's not necessarily gonna be after my school, my first job would be becoming a VC. I think that's very few people can achieve that. But if you are interested in the space and if you're interested in investing, you could take other jobs, for example, an operational role at a startup or just a big tech company role. Anything would work.
Hmm.
Just because I think venture capital is a sort of collective type of experience, is not necessarily something that uh, is having, like I said, just like not really something that is like a straight path. A lot of
Right.
people take many different careers before they get there. So I feel like if you are passionate about getting into the space, you could be flexible about what exactly is your approach if you don't necessarily get a job right away in the space.
Hmm.
That's super helpful information and a great tip because if you think about like as you put a career together, it's okay to be general. It's okay to have different exposures because if you try to then take that into the VC tech investing world, that's actually going to be counting as like you may not have experience on paper, but your experience doing different things is something that could help you maybe stand out and
Mhm.
maybe you'll be able to express yourself to a startup founder that hey, I've done so many different things, I have all these different experiences. As a result of those experiences, I have different networks. Those are the things I could bring to your venture capital firm. So that might be an interesting way to think about like people who are looking to make a career switch. On paper it doesn't seem like you have experience, but if you actually put the full story together in the VC world, it's important to have a much more general approach to things than a specialized approach. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, totally. I think having many experience and just gives you more confidence too to pursue something that maybe can be really uh, competitive. And I think having multiple experience will help you in terms of in the future, maybe sourcing deal or analyzing deal because of you have a lot of backgrounds in different areas. So I think that's definitely a plus for you.
And I imagine getting into either the big tech world or the startup world just gives you the opportunity to kind of network and run with the same people that are running in the VC circles.
Mhm.
And I think knowing the right people can make all the difference when you're trying to sort of make a foray into a new space. Would you agree with that?
I would say get it into tech. That would definitely give you a better network to understand the VC industry better, and it gives you some time to so that you could make the transition. You can start building a network or friendship with people that you would like to learn from. And I definitely feel like that a will give you a lot of experience, so you have actual knowledge in your belly, so you don't really just go beg someone for a job, but you can really just leverage what you know. I think
Mm,
I think a lot of times when I started my career, I thought, networking is very important, but the longer I spend in the industry, the longer I spend to learn about the successful people. I think everybody have a lot of actual knowledge to
mm,
offer. So I feel like having that experience gives you an edge to just learn about one specific industry knowledge. So when you get into VC, when you're trying to get into VC, or when you're talking to someone, you have a lot to talk about. I mean, you can totally get a job after college in VC, but I think building a lot of experience, have the knowledge, will gives you a lot more confidence to go after something that's
mm-hmm,
competitive.
mm-hmm.
100% agreed. I mean, look at your own personal world. I mean, it's your network that's helped you with your podcast. I mean, look at some of the guests that you've been able to have on. You've had a co-CEO of Chipotle before. You've had several investors at big, companies that invest in other big companies. Again, I don't feel comfortable sharing names, but your lineup of guests is a result of your network. And it's just kind of speaking for itself. It's proving what you're saying.
I definitely feel like if anyone wants to have any networking tip, I think there's two tips that I would give. I don't think I'm at any place that I can give any tips, but I'm just saying about like my learning journey. I can share what I've learned. One thing is, instead of thinking about I want to get something out of someone right away, I would just be less like strategic. I literally think I met the most meaningful relationships through when I was not looking. I took comedy class when I came to San Francisco, and I met people who refer me jobs in comedy clubs, and I've met a lot of people just through when I was not really trying to network at a career event or at a
Oh,
conference
wow.
or anything. I think the most meaningful or the most strong relationships I've built are through socially just going into something that I'm really interested in. Like at Dolores Park, I would watch a movie with friends on the park.
Yeah.
And so I feel like a lot of these random meetings really helps me with like just I don't know, like I guess building up a network because I was not really trying to get something out of that person right away. So we genuinely share a conversation that's outside of work. And when you build these bonds, then later on, maybe in a couple months you are looking for something, then the person's way much more willing to help you than you just message them on LinkedIn code. I think that's just from my personal experience. I could be completely wrong. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are killing it out there on LinkedIn. So
Yeah, no,
that's
you're 100% right, and I think we would both agree with that being the approach to take, especially at Dolores, which is one of our favorite, which is one of our favorite parks out there in San Francisco. I miss that place. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it gives you the chance to be more of your authentic self outside of a work environment, and it's then when people can really connect with you, and it's later when that connection bears fruit. So, we both I think would agree with you on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's important to get out there and get involved. It's funny how building those social connections can end up, benefiting your work life later down the line. Whereas, had you put the blinders on and focused only on work in that time period, you would have missed out the opportunity to build on all those connections. So I think it's a testament to the importance of having a balanced life as well.
I think, yeah, totally. I see a huge trend of the people who are in my network started really focusing on having work life balance. I've seen people value more of someone taking a break sometimes than just hustle 24/7. I think previously I've seen a lot of people just say, if you start a startup, you have to hustle hard, don't stop every single day, you hustle. And then lately I've been observing my social media network, and I've seen a lot of people just started posting about, oh, I took a break, I went to somewhere and I was recharged, I came back, I'm more productive. I definitely see there's a huge trend on that. That's something I find really interesting. Then, yeah.
Yeah, I think the pandemic helps with that too. You kind of realize that 24/7 always being on, always trying to hit metrics, always trying to get to a particular like dollar goal or a meeting count, whatever the case may be. It's kind of not relevant if your mental health is deteriorating, if your family life is deteriorating, if everything around you is deteriorating, but your work is good. It's not really a great life.
Yeah, for sure. I think the other part is I think instead of chasing, instead of staring at a particular goal and just maybe like bang your heads against the wall, instead of that, maybe you can uh just like start focusing on like what you can do in front of you. That would help a lot. So whenever I think about I'm trying to achieve something or I'm trying to do something really huge or whatever, and I feel like I tend to stress myself out a lot, but I think like one of the I think the questions that you plan to ask was, what are you, so like what is something that you find challenging? I feel like I find really challenging to take breaks. I find really challenging to uh just slow down sometimes, but I think it's really important to like focus on what's the task in front of you than just think about the big picture every single day. Because if you think
Yeah.
about you want to achieve a certain result, that result is not going to come. It's really just a little step that's right in front of you. Take that step, then take the next step, then that's what gets you there, instead of just visualizing what is a big dream all the time.
Oh my God. I mean, I think Jay and I would agree 100% with that because when you start to look at the big picture too much, that can paralyze you. But if you can take
Yeah.
something that complex and then break it down into simpler sentences or simpler objectives, then you start to chip away. Next thing you know, a week's gone by, a month has gone by, a quarter has gone by, and a year has gone by, and you've achieved that big picture goal without putting all that pressure on yourself every single day. That's 100% an algorithm change that I know I'm making in my own brain as well as like take something complex, don't get overwhelmed by it, and let's break it down into much more simpler things and relieve some anxiety that way.
Yeah, I've heard the line, most people overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can do in a year.
Yeah,
So
totally. I think that's a great line.
So when you think about, again, just tapping into the mindset of the folks that you were able to sit down in front of, I mean, who have been some of your favorite investors and entrepreneurs that you've interviewed? And, like, what are some of the perspective shifts that they provided you that have just stuck that you can share with us?
Totally. I think one thing that really stuck with me was the former co-CEO of Chipotle. I think one of the things that I find really impressive or really stuck with me was he has been such a humble person to interact with. And one thing he did in Chipotle, I believe, was to talk to, I, I don't know if it's every employee, but like he talked to, I think, more than 20K employees in Chipotle, just the workers there, like people who are in the front line. He was undercover to go through the training program.
Oh,
And I
nice.
thought those were things that I aspire to do if one day I run, well, Chipotle. I mean, I'll never run Chipotle, but like, I'm just saying in general, if I'm like running a company, I think those are things that I find I would totally just adopt that concept to learn from people who are actually uh, work just in the front line. I think those
Yeah.
are just that's just something really stuck with me, just because you really have to understand the employees better and have the empathy so you can run a better company. So that's just definitely some conversation that I had. And I think in the end, I asked him about who would he invite to his dinner party. So normally people would imagine the celebrities of the world or the politician or the basketball players, but he mentioned just homeless people in front of Dairy Queen or like Chipotle employees. So I
wow.
I was, yeah, I was really shocked. And uh in a good way. So he is definitely really someone that I really look up to. And after having the conversation, that really, I think that was just really mind blowing.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's a slightly different way of creating a story around your brand and also connecting with the people. And as you mentioned, creating that empathy. And I think reading through your book and listening to your podcast, for me, some of the things that have stuck from your interviews, everyone definitely talks about that empathy, but also people talk about just being able to pivot. People talk about just having no fear of rejection. People talk about the fact that things take a long time. I think that's another important point from your interviews that I gathered, which is like, don't expect it to happen yesterday.
I totally agree with you on that. I think I was really, I guess, like was expecting something that's just, I wouldn't say overnight success, but because I've seen so many of my friends were doing so well in such a short period of time. But I don't think that is the norm if you actually want to achieve something. And after interviewing people in different stages in their career, especially the most successful ones, I find that life is really a long game. I don't even know if people can even remember what their first, second, third, or 10th job. Because I think a lot
Yeah.
of people, when they're early on in their career, they were also doing things like an analyst somewhere or just really, or even like, I believe after I was researching some of my guests, and I think a lot of people's first job was working at the Dairy Queens of the world.
Yeah. Or
So
it's like
I think,
selling newspapers or doing something random like that.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So I think people will only remember your successful moments. People normally don't tend to remember what you were doing before that. So when you're reading the newspaper or looking into the news, people always see something happen overnight. But normally it's someone grinding it out for many, 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 many
Hmm.
years
Yeah.
before they were doing something amazing. And I wouldn't say amazing because I think probably before that they were doing something amazing too. But
Mm.
I would say just like the society highlight as a huge success.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's actually something that I think society can get better at, which is normalizing some of these imperfections, normalizing the long process that it takes, normalizing the long game. A lot of people are so focused on short-term results, like, oh, what is this pandemic going to do for me in the short term? But a venture capital like investor, they've invested in companies that they think are going to pan out well 5-10 years from now. So
Totally.
it's interesting, like that mindset there of like,
Mhm.
you can even have a virus and these people are still thinking 5 or 10 years ahead of time. And overnight is really 15 years. So
Totally agree with you. I think having the long-term mindset is definitely really important.
How do you sort of gauge whether a company will be relevant and healthy 5 to 10 years down the line when there are so many variables and so many things that can change between now and then? You know, as a former investment professional in that world and as someone who talks with a lot of people in the community, what is the mindset of someone trying to look into the future when they don't have a crystal ball and determine whether the VC in front of them is going to be successful?
I think that kind of remind me of like the VC feedback loop is super long. When I started my career, I definitely asked that question to a lot of investors. I was like, hey, uh, how can you predict something that's going to be successful or not successful in 5 to 10 years? And I think there were some benchmark around it. Of course, like if a company can raise to the next round is very important to, and that's like a metrics. And then also the growth metrics because of how fast you're growing. And those are all kind of characteristic that people value. Um, I think those are just some benchmarks that people use in the industry to see if something will work.
Hmm.
But yeah, like I also see really interesting cases. For example, say Slack. I believe when they started was a video gaming company, and in the middle they pivot into because they build a communication channel within their company, and they eventually end up just focusing double down on the communication channel. So I thought that was really interesting. I assume their investor, my assumption is their investor probably don't really think uh, they were going to become a communication channel in the
Yeah.
middle. So I
Yeah.
definitely feel like that's something that's really not that obvious to see at the beginning, but it eventually still become really successful.
It's fascinating. Absolutely.
So that's interesting. I mean, do you know? So just think about your own network. Where do people who have gone through this experience, they've tried to launch a couple of times, they're unsuccessful, where do they end up? Like, where do
I
founders who don't successfully launch typically end up?
I just really I asked Eris about this question last week, but I think from my personal observation was I saw a lot of people just work in tech still. Like sometimes like people get acquired by another company just because of the talents that they have in their company, or sometimes because of the technology they got acquired. So that acquisition is one way, and then the other way would be a lot of people I think just doing successfully at Google. Like literally, I saw really just people I met years ago. They were doing a startup, and they just the startup doesn't exist anymore, but they end up working at big tech company. So I've seen many of the people were just doing great in what they're doing now, although it's not really their startup anymore.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's interesting because earlier you mentioned around how some of these folks, well, maybe not all, but some, they like to show empathy and they do things that are interesting. But what is the culture in the VC world around mentorship? Like, how willing are people in terms of giving their secrets out? Or is it kind of like you got to know? Is it really like it's not what you know to you know in that world? How willing are people in terms of being open about their experience and their secrets and wanting
Mhm.
to help the younger VC actually succeed?
I think that's a really interesting question because I've really like I think I was just really lucky that most people I met are uh definitely really like willing to help. That's I think I'm really grateful for that. But I definitely feel like one thing people overlook was, are you trying to be ready yourself? I think a lot of people come across as they just want someone to hand all their knowledge to you right away. And I feel like that's just disrespectful for the people who are on the other side of the table, because I think you really have to show that you're trying hard, you're trying your best. I've asked advice from people before, and there were like younger people who are in college, like asked me advice before. And from my perspective, I feel like a lot of the people who are doing successfully are the guys that are really, or the girls that are really, really prepared. They were trying
Mm,
their 120%. So people want to help them instead of like they were just trying to wait for someone to give them everything. I
right.
think showing the hustle, showing you're trying your best, you're leveraging all your resources, that definitely help you to go a long way. I think the attitude and the mentality and just showing the attitude is just really important.
That's probably very important for any female who wants to enter this world too, because I mean, it's a predominantly male dominated world. And if you're a female and you're trying to crack in, just follow what Grace just said. Just show up, put 120% in, use your resources, put in the effort, stay at it, stay consistent, and it'll pan out. I think that's advice that can be shared for sure.
Thank you. I think no matter if your goal is to get into VC or just be successful in general or creating a startup, I think just making the effort into what you're doing, I think people can see no matter what you're doing. So, for example, you're account executive working at a startup, or you are just working at a job that you find this is not going to be my last job, you're trying your best to do something. I feel like as long as you try your hardest, and someone will see that you're trying, and someone will be willing to help. It may not be just like the people that you find the Steve Jobs of the world, but it could be people that who are going to make an influence in your life. It could be your boss, it could be your peers, it could be just your buddy working at a startup. So it could be anyone. If people were looking at you, seeing this person's a really hardworking person, he's smart, capable of doing things, I think your opportunity will come to you. Then if you're, I think, waiting for someone who is a really significant person in the world and trying to guide you through all your difficulties, I don't think that will just in my case, I don't think that's like the necessary case. So
Absolutely. Yeah, I think a theme I'm picking up here is that hard work is paramount to success, going all the way back to your comments around, your friends that you met when you first moved into the area and how hardworking they were and how execution oriented they were. At the end of the day, it comes down to action and execution, actually getting things done. And I think maybe that's a useful piece of advice for people that have an idea for a company. The idea is maybe like 1 or 2% of it, but 98% of it is actually what you do with that idea.
absolutely. And I feel like a lot of the times, in terms of like having mentors or mentorships, I think, sure, mentors are important. But on the other hand, I think a lot of the peers actually also can make a huge impact in your life. So they could be your friends or anything. So look at all the successful founders. A lot of times their co-founders are their friends. And I don't think anyone can get to anywhere just by themselves. So I think having a peer group that are also driven and like I guess like instead of networking with the people that are extremely successful, you could also spend the energy on just having uh build really strong relationship with people that are around you. I think sometimes people really overlook like that piece. I think the peers could be just like equally as helpful as sometimes like having a really just amazing people that are like way above you.
Right. I mean, you really don't want to be lonely at the top, because if you're lonely at the top, that means that you haven't done enough to bring people along with you. You don't have peers alongside with you. And yeah, so you don't want to be lonely at the top. And the only place where success comes before work is the dictionary.
Yeah, that's funny. I was gonna say I don't want to be lonely in the middle either, but
I guess you never want to be lonely, is the
Yeah.
yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah, for sure. So as we wrap up here, let's just kind of get into just who you are and just a little bit of your mindset. I mean, what do you want to be known for?
God, that's such a soul-searching question. I was thinking about it yesterday, but I think I just want to be known for someone who is, I guess, helpful and people that are. I think when I started the podcast, I really was trying to help people with not really direct access to the tech or entrepreneurial worlds. I think when I started, I feel like I I've seen how great the network is in Silicon Valley a lot of times. Like, so I heard some of my friends walking down campus and meeting some of the greatest entrepreneurs. And I feel like I wanted to create that experience for people who are not necessarily living in Silicon Valley, not necessarily have the direct access, not really knowing, where exactly to look for those kind of information, to have a place to get inspired, to uh, get the courage to pursuing something that they want to do. So that's really genuinely why I created the podcast or creating these books, because I feel like that could just, I mean, I don't want to be like, can change someone's life, but I do feel like having the information, you're more likely to make a move, take an action. So
Yeah.
that's just was my original goal for creating these things, to share the assets, to share the knowledge so people could also improve themselves. Um, and so that's like my primary goal. And I thought I just want to be remembered for that. So if one day someone created something and then they're like, oh, back in time I was listening to this, or back in time I read a book about this, and I decided to, make some small actions, and one day it turned into something, or anything. So I feel like just motivating people are something that I want to be remembered for.
Absolutely. So again, the podcast is Smart Venture Podcast. The book that we
Thank
were
you.
referring to was How to Be a VC. And if you think about what you just said and what you're doing, it's amazing. And we hope, continued success, because you are literally the node to the world. You are recognizing talent, you're connecting us to them through your podcast, you're redistributing information, you're forwarding, you're communicating, all of this through your podcast, and you've plugged me into the world, so I appreciate it personally.
I really appreciate that you guys are having me on, and I feel like what you guys are doing are amazing too. It helps people to look into the authors' worlds, or like people who are just like interested in business, interested in this growth mindset. And I feel like what you guys are doing are also really amazing and impressive as well.
Thank you, Grace.
Thank you,
that.
Grace.
And I enjoy all my audience over there. There's like 3 people behind you, and there's a bear behind Jay. So,
Yeah. Thank you. And also the female flower lady. So
yeah, the
say
flower
hello
lady.
to Miss Flowers over there.
Well.
Yeah,
Love
Yeah,
that.
beautiful. No,
the
thank you,
5 of them,
Grace.
so.
No, we appreciate the time together. We hope to continue the conversation. Hopefully, after some time passes, or after a span passes, we can bring you on and get an update on what's going on in your world.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I would love to come on again. Thank you so much, Arjun and Jay.